back in now. We're going to talk about the third leg of our Appalachian Trail route in Georgia. And this is part 3, which runs from Unicoi Gap to the North Carolina border. Actually, this particular route goes past the North Carolina border and a little bit into North Carolina. The next trailhead where you can park a car after that border is at Deep Gap, North Carolina. So that's where we're going to be going. A little bit about the Appalachian Trail. Some of you folks have seen this from earlier presentations, but we'll just cover it real quick. It's a footpath going from Georgia all the way to Maine, right up the eastern seaboard here. It's 2,193 miles long. It goes through 14 US states, and it's the longest hiking only footpath in the world. So there's no other type of traffic allowed on this trail, such as equestrian or ATVs or bikes or anything. This is all just to be walked. There's 464,500 feet of elevation change. So there's a lot of ups and downs. Of course, is it all straight up? It's up and down, and that's your total net of all the ups and downs. And so as you can see, there's a rugged terrain throughout the Appalachian range here. And over 3 million people visit every year. It's very popular. Not all of them are doing long hikes, but there's a lot of day hiking. It's just a great place to get away and experience some beauty. It's maintained completely by volunteers. That's the way it was originally envisioned, as being a volunteer-supported footpath, and that these volunteers would be organized into local groups. So there are local state-affiliated AT groups. So there's one for Georgia, one for North Carolina, et cetera. And each of them recruits and organizes their own volunteers, and they're responsible for their section of the trail and keeping it maintained so we can hike it. And then there's this umbrella organization called the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, and they're responsible overall for maintaining it and maintaining, relationships with Congress, because this is also a federally ordained National Scenic Trail as part of the 1968 Trail Systems Act of Congress. And so this also this map gives you an idea of how long on average it takes to hike each section of that Appalachian Trail. We'll talk about Georgia, the section in Georgia. This part of Georgia is just way up in the north part of Georgia. Those of us who live down in North Florida may not know about this section of Georgia. You probably do, but it's not what we know as Georgia, like, some of the like St. Mary's and Augusta, or, Savannah down in the lowlands, or the peanut farms or the cotton fields or the peach trees. None of that. This is rugged mountainous terrain. The lowest elevation on the AT in Georgia is over 2,500 feet. And the average height here is higher than you'll see anywhere till you get north of Virginia, well, except for North Carolina. And what you get here is a hiking experience of continuous ups and downs. There's a lot of up and down, not a lot of ridge walking, and not a lot of huge ascents, but there's just so much of them. We call them PUDs, pointless ups and downs. So it's pretty rugged, pretty wild. This section passes through several federally designated wildernesses. So it's a nice, pristine environment up there. Most of the AT is like that. It's maintained by the local trail club, as I mentioned, the Appalachian Trail Club in Georgia. They have a website, georgia-atclub.org, where you can go to get some guidance, do some research on how to hike that section of the trails, get information about shuttles to the trailheads, current conditions of such as water sources on the trail and such. So the other thing that's neat about the Appalachian Trail is they've formed partnerships with some of the towns along the way. Most of these are small towns, and they want to maintain a friendly relationship with the people in the towns, between hikers and townspeople. So there's these cooperative relationships that have been formed, and certain towns have been designated as trail communities. So in Georgia, there's Blairsville, Dahlonega, Helen, and Hiawassee. So Helen and Hiawassee are both near trailheads that we're going to be talking about tonight. And I'll particularly talk about an experience I had in Hiawassee. So I wanted to talk tonight a little bit about safety on the trail. We've had some questions earlier in some of our earlier talks. So there's a number of aspects to maintaining safety on the trail. Again, I want to talk about it not to be discouraging anybody from hiking and just getting out and enjoying this beautiful part of the country. But I have had a lot of questions about it, and I don't think I have addressed it enough yet so far in our trail talks. So I want to talk a little bit about it tonight. First aspect to safety is being in shape, your fitness and conditioning. So of course that's relevant to what you're attempting to do. So many people get on the trail from very public trailheads, and maybe like last week we talked about Blood Mountain. There were a lot of day hikers when I was up there last. A lot of people want to get out on into nature right now. During COVID, it's one of the safe experiences if you do it right. It's just to be outdoors, and so there's actually has been quite a lot of activity up on the trail this year. And so that's a pretty steep climb, but as a day hike, you can it's not that, and it's not like you're climbing Mount Everest or anything. So, it's whatever, I think it was like 900 feet elevation over 2 miles. So, it's definitely something you can do in a day. And plenty of people do it, and they're not, necessarily, in great conditioning. And if you don't feel like you can make it, you can turn around and go back. But if you take a longer hike, you need to be aware that, it particularly as you get older, it's going to take a lot out of your body, and you should be ready to do it. And you should prepare and get yourself in shape. So a lot of walking ahead of time with your pack on. If you can find an area which has some ups and downs. I was just hiking last week out in the Western Panhandle, in a section that had a lot of ups and downs. It was almost like you were in the mountains, sort of, but it was Florida. So a place like that is great just to get your legs going and to feel your pack and, put in, 5, 6, 7, 8 miles a day when you can, and get ready. You can also hike stairs, go up and down stairs. You can work on Stairmasters. But yeah, that's the other thing we have to be concerned about, because here in Florida, because we don't, we don't have any grades or any sort of uphill and downhill experience here. So yeah, you need to get those muscles in shape however you can, or you'll just enjoy your hike a lot more. But the other thing about conditioning is that, as you get tired, and this happens more towards the end of the day, you're likely to make more mistakes. So that's, I guess, the second point here, accidents. I mean, the simple accident is just twisting your ankle. The terrain is, not like you're walking on a sidewalk or anything. There's a lot of rocks, a lot of roots, a lot of, slippery sections. And you're walking with, if you're going for several days, you probably have 30 pounds on your back. And, balance issues. So, as you get tired, you lose focus and you tend to have accidents. So the more you're in shape, the less you feel tired, the less you'll lose focus, and the more you're able to be hiking safely and avoiding accidents. So I guess the other accident thing is, there are some, sharp drops here, where there'll be rocks, there'll be outcrops, there'll be sections where you want to get out and look and see the beautiful scenery, but just watch your footing and don't slip off those rocks. Some people do, and could get really badly injured or killed. So a lot of this is about maintaining your situational awareness. That's one thing I like about hiking. I mean, we kind of get lost in our thoughts, or lost in our computers, or lost in our phones, and we're sort of in this kind of world in our minds a lot of the time in our normal lives. And when you get out and you've got to, be paying attention to what's around you, your conditions, the terrain, the footing, any other threats that might be around you, if you want to put it that way, then you're aware, you're attuned to what's happening in the moment. It's a nice experience, but I mean, it's actually a vital experience, because when you lose focus, that's when you can hurt yourself, or you can be in danger from other threats. So I guess the third point here I have is getting lost. So that's really about knowing how to stay on the trail. It's pretty easy. It's blazed very well. There's white marks on trees and rocks, and you follow those white marks, and that'll get you from here to there. But if you tend to get lost, then you need to know how to get unlost, So there's, how to orient yourself, carry maybe, well, definitely, at least carry a compass. Paper map's good. Now everything's digital. So, there's apps on your phone that are GPS-based apps with the maps. I would really recommend having that, and that'll help you get back on the trail. But that's another thing you need to know is how to get around, how to take care of yourself, and get yourself back to civilization or back to a trail. Whether
Bill, do you use all trails?
I use Gut Hook.
Gut Hook. Okay.
All trail is good for almost everywhere, but the major trails in the U.S. which have maps on Gut Hook, I found Gut Hook to be the best guide. You get all your waypoints. There's a lot, of information on there that's been checked out about waypoints, about water sources, elevation is all in there, and it's a social app. So I guess All Trails is too, but there's a lot of comments on there. So you get really pretty recent information on trail conditions. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't know many people using All Trails that much on the AT or the Florida Trail. Mostly what you see is Gut Hook. And you can get paper maps from the AT Conservancy. Those are always good. And then you need to know how to use them. You need to know how to orient here with a with a compass. It's helpful to know. Again, you're not in, outer Siberia or anything, but people do get lost in some of the areas where there's bad weather, or, gets to be colder during the, end of the season. You could get yourself in some danger if you're lost up there. The other thing I like to say about getting lost is they've got kind of like homing beacons that you could buy called spots. I think I use one that's a little more fully functional, or more functional, it's called a Garmin InReach. But the basic thing these all do is they're sending out a ping of, your GPS location. And so if you do get lost, then someone can track that ping back to you and find out where you are. So I think that's pretty important too. But there's, old school stuff like carrying a whistle, and, whistle is like a universal danger signal. I'm in trouble. 3 blasts on the whistle. You can have a little mirror someone's trying to find you by plane or something, you just glint that mirror in the sun and they'll be able to see you. Anyway, moving on, weather is an issue too. So I check the weather before you get out on the trail. I mean, rain is rain. I mean, you can hike through rain. There have been some pretty bad lightning storms. The hike I'm going to take you on today, I had that experience. We had everyone just bailed off the trail. There have been a few hurricanes this year up there. So, you don't want to stay on there in the hurricane and have the branch of the trees fall on top of you. So, there are weather conditions, certainly cold. You need to worry about making sure you're warm and you have your right clothing with you so that you can take care of, with, cold temperatures so you don't get hypothermia. Really hot temperatures, you need more water. So you need to be hydrated. You need to maybe take electrolytes with you. So weather is important to pay attention to. People always ask about animals like bears, will I get eaten by a bear? Will I get bitten by a rattlesnake? Yes, all these things exist, but basically these animals on this trail aren't really looking to you as prey. So if you leave them alone, typically they leave you alone. The biggest problem with bears is people leaving food out. So you need to protect your food. You need to hang it in a certain way so it's out of the reach of bears and other pests that will steal your food. But bears are particularly bad because then they get used to humans having food. So then they're going to identify you with food. And so we don't want to do that. And so when that happens, then bears then become a problem and a real nuisance and a little bit of a danger. So the more everyone practices safe food storage, then the better. And many of these shelters along the trail, they have bear cables, so you don't have to hang your own bag. You just put it on these cables, or they have bear boxes where you put it in the box and they're bear proof. Disease. Water sources up there are pretty clean, but you never know what's upstream. So it's always recommended you filter or purify with drops or tablets or boil your water before you drink it. And so, you could get some intestinal diseases, which will really make your hike, a very poor experience. Let me tell you, there's one called Giardia, which gets into the water and you have a really intense intestinal sickness for about 24 hours. So that's not good. There are ticks that you should be watching for. Pretty much everyone knows about that, but there are a couple different types of ticks, and they can give you kind of a lifetime chronic disease that you'd rather not have and deal with the rest of your life. So watch out for ticks. Inspect yourself every day and get those ticks off of you. Gear is important. And so that's important with safety, that you have the right shoes, that you have the right clothing for the weather you're walking through. Hiking poles are, sometimes I guess you could say recommended. I don't know if they're exactly required, but they're helpful because, again, you're top heavy with a pack if you're going for several days, and you'll be many times thrown off balance by going over a small plank footbridge or, going over some rubble or big rocks. So they just help with balance. Nutrition and hydration, you've got to stay hydrated. If you get dehydrated, you're going to start feeling really bad. You don't want to eat. You get a little dizzy. You're not going to be focused. You're going to make mistakes. So stay hydrated, get some electrolytes in you, bring those along with you if you need them, so you can have them when you need them. You need to eat. If you're going for several days, you're going to burn a lot of calories. So they say, you should be consuming 2,500 to 4,000 calories a day on the trail. So just make sure you have plenty to eat, plenty of snacks, lightweight food, of course, that you typically rehydrate on the trail. And then some people worry about crime. Actually, the Appalachian Trail is one of the safest places to be in the United States. There have been problems because there are people on the Appalachian Trail, and people, sometimes hurt each other. However, if you look at the United States, the overall murder rate for the last statistics I had was 7.35 out of 100,000 people per year. On the Appalachian Trail, there have been murders, I mean, it's a 2,100 mile trail. There have been 10 murders in 46 years. So that's just one aspect of crime, but people are afraid of that. People are afraid of other people. People are afraid of unknown folks out there, and there's no law enforcement, et cetera. Well, there have been 10 murders, but that's over 46 years. And with the number of people hiking, the rate is 0.0072 per 100,000. So it's actually very safe, but I would just say it's the same as anything else, keeping your awareness, keeping your situational awareness. So if someone seems a little hinky, just stay away, and maybe report them at the next trailhead, but I've never had that problem myself, but well, I've had it once in Florida, but it just kind of, he was probably very nice, but I just sort of stayed away from him. So just keep your wits about you. Some people, there's a whole debate about, should you bring your gun and that sort of thing. That's kind of a personal decision, but you need to be aware of the firearms laws. If you're crossing through multiple states, there will be separate jurisdictions with their own laws about carrying guns, and licensing and all that. So you got to be taking care of that. I'm not into that, so I don't know much about it. Some people like to carry a big knife. Some people like to carry, what do you call it? The spray. Statistically, that's probably the least of your worries. So that's a little bit about safety. I don't know if we have any questions at this point, but I did want to address it. Okay. And just real quick on planning a hike, we talked earlier about these AT Conservancy guides. That's good if you're doing what's called a section hike, which is like several days or several weeks maybe with a long section hike. But then there's what's called a through hike. Some people try to do everything from Georgia all the way through in 1 year to Maine. So that's called a through hike. And there's this guide called AWOL. You can look it up online, and it's a book, and it just tells you everything you need to know about the logistics of planning that through hike and sending ahead your supplies and that sort of thing. We already talked about gut hook. I'd say it's indispensable to have that on your phone if you're on your own or you're leading a group hiking in the Appalachian Trail. There's a Facebook group, Appalachian Trail Hikers or Appalachian Trail Section Hikers. You can put questions up there as the current trail conditions. It's really, really good. And the local AT club, which I've already mentioned. So just real quick, here are the sections that we've already done: Springer to Woody Gap to Unicoi Gap. Tonight, we're going to talk about Unicoi Gap to Deep Gap. So each of these is about 30 miles. And as I said before, they might be good, 3 or 4 day hikes for you guys, if anyone wants to try a longer hike, because they've got really good trailheads at each end. And so the total mileage in Georgia on the Appalachian Trail is 78 miles. If you're going from the approach trail in Amicalola State Park, which we talked about in the first session, all the way to the first trailhead after the border, that's a total of 93.8 miles. And this is basically the route. So this is the first section. Here's the second section. Here is the third section we're going to talk about today. And Atlanta's kind of down here. Okay, so to those who haven't been with us before, we have a free version of Zoom. So that only gives you 40 minutes and we turn into a pumpkin. So we're about 8 minutes away. So I'm going to speed through the next few slides. Hopefully we have a quick chance to have a maybe quick question and say goodbye. So these are the sections along this map. So we're going from point 2 to point 3 here, and then we're finishing up Georgia. Basically, here is a elevation map. So this shows you how rugged this terrain is. Between these red bars, this is the hike we're talking about today, and you've got these big climbs: Rocky Mountain, Trey Mountain, and you've got Kelly Knob. And over here on the other side of Dix Creek, you have Asnob, and then you got Courthouse Bald, which is over here in North Carolina. So those are some big ones. And then as you can see, you come down quite a bit into these gaps every time you do one of those. So here is a little, zoomed in portion of that map, just showing what we're going to do today. And that's from Unicoi up past Bly Gap. So here's just some pictures of that section as I've hiked it. This one was a very wet hike. There was a very big storm coming in. We decided to do it anyway, and we had a plan B to get off the trail if we had to beat a retreat, which it turned out we did. So it's a very gray day. Here's Unicoi Gap. So we're going to be going up to your left on the screen, up a really steep mountain called Rocky Mountain. As you can see, I'm kind of taking a rest here. It's about 1,100 feet up in less than a mile and a half. So that's a pretty rugged way to start. Then it goes down into a gap. And then you just do it all over again and you go up Trey Gap for another 1,100 feet. And some really neat scenery on the way up. A lot of these rock outcrops. And then you get to the top of Trey Mountain, you're at 4,200 feet, and there's a shelter on top. So there's a lot of these shelters, probably every 7 to 10 miles, the length of the whole Appalachian Trail. And so that's one place you can hang out and spend the night if you don't want to set up a tent. And here's a guy we met at that shelter. His name was Cosmo. A lot of people have trail names. People give them nicknames on the trail, and they kind of have this new identity. Here's me out just sort of contemplating the wilderness. Then we moved on, went up Kelly Knob. This is another high climb. Nice overview. And then we got into Deep Gap, Georgia, where there's a shelter. And then from there, you go up this one last mountain, and then you're like 2 or 3 miles straight downhill into Dix Creek Gap. So it's a pretty tough downhill. And our situation was there was this big storm coming in. So all of a sudden we realized we had to get off the trail. So we did extra miles that day just to get down to Dix Creek. And then we caught a ride into town and just got a hotel room down there in Hiawassee, which is about 7 or 8 miles from the trailhead. But we traversed it pretty well with some help from friendly residents who gave us a ride all the way into town. And we had a nice day waiting out the storm in Hiawassee, and it was a very welcoming, very friendly town. Then we got back up on the trail. After Dix Creek, we came up into this Blue Ridge Gap. And then we finally reached the Georgia border. We have this helpful little sign saying you're at the North Carolina border. And that's at about mile 78. And we're up around elevation 3,800 feet. And if you go turn on 180 degrees and from this sign, you're looking at this, rock face, goes straight up. It's kind of a nice place to rest and kind of think about all the miles you've done to get to the border. right after that, there's this gap called Bly Gap, and there's this very strange tree, kind of, it's all these corkscrew limbs, makes that a distinctive landmark. And then from Bly Gap, you can look around, and there's some nice viewpoints from there. And then you continue to go up and down, and you get to the highest point in this section, which is 4,400 feet up. That's Courthouse Bald. It's an absolutely beautiful views from there. And then we stayed at a shelter, another shelter along the way called Muskrat Creek. And that's also pretty high up, 4,600 feet. That's at mile 80. You don't see the shelter here, but there's a lot of tent sites around most of these shelters. And you get the services of the shelter as well. And finally, we got back to our trailhead at Deep Cap, North Carolina. Picked up a lot of friends along the way, and we were ready to head home. So that's my talk tonight.